From its inception in the 1870s, the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society has been rooted in end times and doomsday prophecies, with its founder, Charles Taze Russell, building his movement around the idea that the end of the world was imminent. Using a mixture of biblical numerology and prophetic interpretation, Russell predicted that Christ's invisible return had already occurred in 1874 and that the world would end in 1914 with the establishment of God's kingdom on earth. And the events of 1914, particularly the outbreak of World War I, seemed to offer initial validation for this claim. But when Armageddon failed to materialize, the Watchtower leaders subtly shifted their narrative. And the latest October 2024 broadcast is cut from the very same old playbook. After the disappointment of 1914, the Watchtower's leadership did not abandon its apocalyptic predictions. In fact, they doubled down on the notion that Armageddon was just around the corner. In the 1920s, the organization's second president, Joseph F. Rutherford, shifted the focus to the year 1925. Rutherford claimed that 1925 would see the resurrection of biblical patriarchs like Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who would rule as princes in the new paradise on earth. Yet, when the 1925 came and went without event, the Watchtower once again faced a crisis of credibility. And one of the most infamous failed prophecies in Watchtower history is the prediction that Armageddon would occur in 1975. And beginning in the mid-1960s, the organization began to strongly imply that 1975 marked 6,000 years of human existence, a significant milestone in their theological framework. And publications such as the Awake magazine and the Watchtower hinted that Armageddon would likely occur within the time frame, setting off a wave of excitement and urgency within the Jehovah's Witness community. This was followed by statements in Watchtower magazines that emphasized the nearness of the end, leading to a marked increase in the preaching efforts and significant life changes for many Jehovah's Witnesses. Some members sold their homes, quit their jobs, and devoted themselves full-time to preaching, convinced that the end was only a few short years away. When 1975 came and went without incident, the disappointment within the Jehovah's Witnesses community was palpable. Yet rather than taking responsibility for fostering these expectations, the Watchtower leadership once again shifted the blame onto the membership. In a 1980 issue of the Watchtower, the organization acknowledged that some had wrongly expected the end in 1975, but insisted that these expectations were the result of personal overzealousness rather than anything the organization had said. The gaslighting was clear. Despite the overwhelming evidence that the organization had heavily implied that 1975 would bring about Armageddon, the blame was placed squarely on the shoulders of the individual members for supposedly misinterpreting the message. And it is no different today.
When I first began serving at Bethel, I'd call home to speak with my family, and my mother would always ask, "Have they told you when the date of Armageddon is?" Though she was being humorous and didn't expect an answer, her question reveals what we all long for: Jehovah's promised new world. Maybe you have, in a sense, asked Jehovah that question. How much longer, Jehovah? Or said to Jehovah, I'm exhausted. I don't know how much longer I can keep going. Please, Jehovah, when will your promises for a world of lasting peace, refreshment, and relief from the pressures of this world come true? We all likely feel this way from time to time. What can help us not give up, not give out in our spiritual battle? Note the words of Jesus at Mark 13, verse 29. Notice what he says. Likewise, also you, when you see these things happening, know that he is near at the doors. What things would we see happening? Prophecy being fulfilled. When we recognize Bible prophecies being fulfilled before our eyes, Our faith is fortified. We see the end is imminent. We recognize that we're almost done. That helps us not give out. What are some of these prophecies? You're familiar with the prophecies of earthquakes, wars and reports of wars, food shortages, and disease all happening at once. You see these things happening. We see the diminished love of God and the deteriorating attitude of people in general, as foretold in 2 Timothy chapter 3. 2 Timothy 3:13 says, "Wicked men and impostors will advance from bad to worse." You see these things happening. As foretold, this good news of the kingdom is being preached worldwide, now in over 1,000 languages. You see these things happening. As a result of Christ's rule, the knowledge of Jehovah is abundantly overflowing. You see these things happening. And what about Isaiah 45:18? Here, Jehovah calls himself the maker of the earth, who did not create it simply for nothing, but formed it to be inhabited. Today, scientists say that the world is on the brink of becoming uninhabitable. They warn that if action to stop global warming is not taken quickly, its compounding effects will become irreversible. At Revelation 11:18, the Bible foretold that in our day man would be ruining the earth. And it also assures us that Jehovah will step in and not let the earth be completely ruined.
Every global catastrophe, be it a war, earthquake, famine, epidemic, or financial recession, has Jehovah's Witnesses beside themselves that Armageddon is about to occur. And Watchtower leaders make use of such fear-invoking events, insisting they prove we are at the end of the last days. In 2019, Watchtower coined the phrase, the last days of the last days. We are convinced that we are living during the final part of the last days because so much time has passed since 1914. We must now be living in the last of the last days. That was according to the Watchtower 2019 October edition. And who can forget this JW broadcast video by Stephen Lett?
The spread of this disease is distressing, to be sure. But we're really not surprised to see the world in the grip of such pestilence, are we? Jesus made it clear at Luke 21:11 that pestilence would be part of the sign of the last days. And in Revelation chapter 6, the ride of the fourth horseman includes mention of deadly plague. So the events unfolding around us are making clearer than ever that we're living in the final part of the last days, undoubtedly the final part of the final part of the last days, shortly before the last day of the last days.
This was followed by a flurry of messages from Jehovah's Witnesses to inactive family members to urgently return to the religion. And the phrase, the last days of the last days, has continued to be used since. For Jehovah's Witnesses, this repeated cycle of apocalyptic expectation and disappointment, followed by the organization's denial of responsibility, has led to widespread cognitive dissonance. Many members have been left feeling confused and betrayed, yet because of the insular and authoritarian nature of the organization, they are often unable to voice their doubts without fear of being ostracized or being removed from the congregation. And this next clip in the form of an enactment proves this point.
I knew it was the truth. I just wanted more. But when the pandemic hit, I knew the end was close. I started studying again and got baptized just in time.
He keeps passing this blog information and asking for everyone's opinion.
I saw it.
It's the third one this week.
I'll talk to him. He just needs to verify his sources.
Did you get a chance to read the links I sent you?
Of course I read it.
And?
It's exciting to think we could be so close.
And when you watch the news, you realize it could be any day now.
What's all the excitement?
The cry of peace and security.
Thanks again for sharing.
See you.
Tulani, remember Jesus said, no one knows the day or hour.
But he said we should keep on the watch.
I think it's great you keeping the end close in mind.
Because of you and Linda. Both of you have shown me how close we really are.
I have to take this quickly, but I'll see you on Friday. I saw what was happening in the world, and you both helped me put it all together.
We just want to be sure you are focused on the right things.
We can all start thinking too much about when the end will come.
But I'm just being alert. Isn't that what you taught me to do?
Alert is good.
And if the end is really so far off, why did I need to change my life now?
You're asking the right questions. There was a moment in our lives when we focused too much on the when rather than the why we were serving Jehovah. It affected our zeal, our happiness, our perspective. And we'd never want that for you.
This is the answer.
Since all these things are to be dissolved in this way, consider what sort of people you ought to be in holy acts of conduct and deeds of godly devotion.
We don't know when the end will come. Could be tomorrow. Could take a little longer. But what matters is the kind of person we are when it comes. So focus on your love for Jehovah, His organization, His work. Take the excitement you have and direct it the right way.
The Watchtower's repeated use of gaslighting serves a dual purpose. It absolves the leadership of accountability for their failed prophecies and reinforces the organization's control over its members by insisting that the fault lies with the individual rather than the organization. The Watchtower maintains an image of infallibility. This dynamic discourages critical thinking and fosters a culture of unquestioning obedience to the leadership, as members are conditioned to doubt their own perceptions and trust in the organization's narrative. In addition to the gaslighting, the Watchtower has engaged in a form of historical revisionism, where past prophecies and statements are downplayed, reinterpreted, or outright erased from the organization's official history. This can be seen in how the organization addresses the failed prophecies of 1940, 1925, and 1975. Rather than acknowledging these as mistakes, the Watchtower presents them as either misunderstood or as steps in the gradual unfolding of God's plan. The light gets brighter doctrine. For example, while the organization initially presented 1914 as the year when Armageddon would occur, it later reinterpreted the event as the beginning of the last days, with the actual end still to come. And this revisionist approach allows the Watchtower to sidestep accusations of false prophecy while maintaining the urgency of their message. And in the case of 1975, many Jehovah's Witnesses today are unaware of the extent to which the organization promoted the significance of that year. And when confronted with evidence, the typical response is disbelief, as the Watchtower has worked hard to distance itself from the failed predictions. And the most recent JW broadcasts echo the sentiment, urging witnesses not to focus on when the end will come, but to remain vigilant in their service to God. However, this message contrasts sharply with the organization's long history of using specific dates and world events to create a sense of urgency and fear among its followers. In doing so, the Watchtower engages in a form of gaslighting that causes its members to question their own recollection of past teachings and prophecies. And even in the latest broadcast, the speaker contradicts himself with these following statements.
Some may wonder how much worse things will get. Interestingly, at Luke 17:20, Jesus said this. Luke 17:20, "The kingdom of God is not coming with striking observableness." This means that world conditions during the last days would not be so extreme that people would be forced to believe that the end is near. As Matthew 24:37 through 39 indicates, they would still be eating and drinking, getting married, and able to carry on their everyday lives. How should this affect us? It should fortify us not to give up. At Mark 13:35, Jesus said we must keep on the watch. This means stay awake, be on guard.
So which is it, Troy? What a contradiction. It is important to have a reality check of the period we live in. It is common to suffer from illness and financial stress and at times feel overwhelmed by life's anxieties. But these do not make this the worst time in history to be alive or indicate these are the last days. Watchtower's constant claims that humans are suffering through the most difficult living circumstances in all history since 1940 is based on either ignorance or carefully crafted deception. Rather than appreciate how much safer and more enjoyable life is than in centuries past, it is sad that Jehovah's Witnesses are required to wallow in the negative conviction that they are living in the most shocking times, longingly waiting for this worldly system to end. The signs of the last days are so generic that it is easy to apply them to any period in time. And for many witnesses, the psychological toll of these tactics is immense. The constant cycle of anticipation and disappointment, coupled with the organization's refusal to acknowledge its mistakes, leaves members feeling confused and disempowered. Yet, despite these challenges, some are beginning to wake up to the reality of the Watchtower's manipulation and are seeking a way out of the mental and emotional prison that has been constructed around them. The legacy of dishonesty and gaslighting within the Watchtower Society serves as a cautionary tale for anyone who finds themselves involved in a high control group. It highlights the dangers of unquestioning loyalty to an organization that prioritizes its own survival over the well-being of its members, and it underscores the importance of critical thinking and personal accountability in the search for truth.